Okay, guys, we're back. Welcome to Frequalize This, and we are continuing our journey through the albums of 1971 with I'm Rich, and that's Dave and John. And let's dive into it. Are you ready to go, guys? We have some really interesting matchups to talk about, some really good ones, and a couple times where a couple of heavyweights go up against each other. We're starting to see that already. So, what is the first one we're going to talk about? John, take it away.
Okay. Well, first, I want to just give a frame of reference of where we are in the competition. So we are back up into the winners bracket. So if you've been following along, this is episode 3, and we are back up in the winners bracket, starting with our 25th game. So I'll just go with that one because this one is, like you said, Rich. This is a couple of heavy hitters, if you ask me. We've got Jethro, Tull's Aqualung versus Pink Floyd's Meddle. So these two albums have already been in battle. Aqualung has already won one, and Pink Floyd's Meddle has already won one as well. And so they're both winners, but someone's got to lose on this one. And I love both of these albums.
No, this is definitely a difficult one. I think there's an element which you could make the argument that Aqualung, whether and we can get into this momentarily, whether Ian Anderson thinks it should be the Tull album or not. Pink Floyd does better albums following. And we've talked about that a little bit. So I think there's maybe a little bit of a rub there. But I mean, you get your tracks like, Echoes for one. And Saint-Tropez, I've always loved Saint-Tropez. For whatever reason, that's a really fun song. But you throw it up against, Hymn 43 or Locomotive Breath. And, it's...
Yeah.
It's difficult. I think... Yeah, I mean, Rich, you want to give it away where we landed the plane on this?
Yeah, we landed the plane with Jethro, Tull, Aqualung, but really, I mean, this is the tough one for me too, just because I listened to I'm with John. I don't remember what I voted for either, but I will say that I listened to Meddle a whole lot more than Aqualung. And I echo your sentiment, Dave. Saint-Tropez is a great song. It's really weird to think that at one point in time, Roger Waters actually had a sense of humor about himself, and he wasn't this old cranky curmudgeon. But speaking of cranky curmudgeons, I mean, you also have over with Jethro Tull, Ian Anderson. This is the definitive Tull album, but you get the feeling that Anderson is not that much of a fan of Aqualung being the definitive Tull album. He's kind of implied as such in interviews over the years, at least I think.
Yeah.
Well, he's kind of a contrarian. I mean, there's a way in which you push him enough, he's just going to go the opposite direction for the sake of going the opposite direction.
Mm-hmm.
Might be why I like him. I don't know.
Dave, when you said what you said there, Saint-Tropez up against something like Hymn 43 or Locomotive Breath, that's when I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's why Aqualung wins. I mean, if you go track by track, well, no, the way I should say it is album. Aqualung really is the stronger album experience, I think. Whereas I think for some people, they could pick out some tracks off of Meddle where they say, I like this track better than anything on Aqualung. But Aqualung does get credit, and it did get credit with the group that was voting here for being such a cohesive album experience. That's one thing I've always felt about Meddle. Meddle, to me, always felt like a little bit more like a collection of songs. But boy, in my entire lifetime, I'm sure I've listened to Aqualung way more than Meddle. But nowadays, it's probably Meddle that I'm going to pull off the shelf.
Sure.
Yeah. All right, so we got that settled with Jethro Tull. Now the next matchup is Badfinger Straight Up versus the Rolling Stones Sticky Fingers. And I'll start off. I'm a Sticky Fingers guy all the way here. No offense to Badfinger, they're good, but this album is just peak Stones. I mean, I know on the very first episode when we started doing this exercise, we talked about artists that were not hitting their peak just yet, like Stevie Wonder, for example. And this catches the Stones right in that peak. I mean, it starts with Beggars Banquet and Let It Bleed and goes right into Sticky Fingers and then into Exile on Main Street. It's just, this one is so good.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. There's just really no comment here. This is not, for me, a classic Badfinger album. And it is absolutely a banger of a Stones album.
Yeah. And I'm not a big Stones fan, period, but yet, if you're going to go to a Stones album and pull one out, this is probably the likely one to do it with. So, I mean, it just, this one, kind of a no-brainer. But still, I mean, it's not a tough matchup, but it's a good combination to kind of square off with each other.
Yeah. Well, it's contrasting, it's almost like a continuation of the Beatles versus Stones debate that happened in the 60s, just because Badfinger is definitely, they were referred to by some people as, oh, this is the next Beatles. Didn't happen, but, they were signed by Apple, so there is that.
There's that, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Want to take us through the next one, Dave?
Yeah, the next one, this is, I know you kind of, we've talked about this, kind of off air in a sense with this one. You got Marvin Gaye, What's Going On? Led Zeppelin 4.
Yeah. The fact that these two titans are going against each other, these great albums, this early is kind of just unfair.
Well, but it speaks to the way in which we ranked things, and we let the group as a whole kind of give our own impressions, and that kind of weighted the rankings. Which, if you're looking to, here's a top albums in 1971 from Rolling Stone, they're going to rank it. They're going to seed things differently.
Yeah.
But the mood of the group set things up in a way that, definitely for you, Rich, that kind of set things off in a spot where it's like, oh, come on, Marvin Gaye's got to last longer. There's got to be more. He can't take a loss this early. But it's Zeppelin 4.
Yeah. And really, we've already seen this before in the first round where we're like, oh, come on, Nursery Crime by Genesis can't lose this early. And I will tell you, Led Zeppelin 4, losing to Led Zeppelin 4 is a whole lot better than losing to Madman Across the Water by Elton John.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's no shame in this, but let the record show that this is no way in shape or form indicative of what an excellent album What's Going On is, because it's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's probably one of those ones where the scoring was not accurate to the pairing, if that makes sense.
But Zeppelin 4 is Zeppelin 4. I mean, come on with it.
Right. It's one of those ones where at this moment is like, that doesn't feel fair. It is what it is at this point.
Yeah.
We did have some good discussion in the chat room about this one at the time that it was happening. I remember that. Rich in particular decrying its demise, early demise at the hands of a juggernaut of an album. But I feel like, and maybe you guys might remember a little bit better than I do, but I feel like, though, mission accomplished in that we turned on some people to this Marvin Gaye album that had not spent a lot of time with it before.
And I'm one of those where I probably need to go back to it. That's not an album. It's one of those ones where you culturally are aware of it, but are you personally aware of it? And I think that's where I've been.
Yeah, and I think that's really the purpose of this exercise and the group that we're involved in, just because we want to turn people on to new music, other stuff that they haven't heard before, whether it's a new artist, new genre, new whatever. And yeah, like you said, mission accomplished.
Yeah, Rich, this was an opportunity for us to expose each other to stuff that maybe we weren't as familiar with. And to me, that made the whole competition just so much fun to do it that way.
Yeah, I would agree with that too, and it was great. And I think that actually segues into our next Cat Stevens, Teaser and the Firecat versus the Doors LA Woman. And you, John, had said that you were not familiar with Teaser and the Firecat at all. You were blown away by how great the album was.
Absolutely, absolutely. So a guy in our group named Dan is the one who I think was the real champion for this to be included and to be um, voted for when it came up. And he talked about how, and we're all affected by this. This is an album that he grew up with. This was an album his parents were putting on all the time. I mean, that's why I'm as big of a Beatles fan as I am. And the Beach Boys and the Carpenters, I'll admit it. So I didn't have this one playing in my house growing up, and man, I wish I had. Amazing album, absolutely amazing. Way better than anything the Doors has ever done.
I don't know that I would go that far.
I wouldn't go that far, but
well, and I probably voted for LA Woman. I'll just put it there. I'm that's probably where I'm probably still more of a lean that direction. But it's partially just because I'm not as familiar. I didn't have the exposure. I mean, we talk about this, I'm probably in the group, the one when Dan throws his random whatever, I'm probably one of the more likely ones to be tracking with him. But he has some moments where he just kind of goes, for me, left field. This felt left field for me, but I appreciate it. It is, Cat Stevens is an important artist that's done some important work. Not stuff that's been kind of my thing, but probably a worthy selection to continue on at this point.
Yep. And Rich, how did this one end up?
It was Cat Stevens winning, which I think was the right call because, like I would not say that Stevens this record was the best, would have beat anything in the Doors output, but definitely LA Woman for me has been kind of a weak spot for reasons I previously gotten into. So this was an easy win for me for Stevens, and the group agreed. So John, go talk us through the next one.
So this next one, I feel like we've got a huge, massive monolith, obelisk, something like that, going up against just a really cool laid-back dude. So it's the Who's Next versus Nilsson Schmilsson by Harry Nilsson. And shoot, poor Harry, like no contest.
I love the analogy where you're the monolith. Yes, okay. So we can all visualize the album cover, but then you also, but okay, laid back. Look at the Harry Nilsson's album cover. He's in a bathrobe, and he looks like, hey, I'm just going to wander out and I want to do some tunes today. Yeah, sure, okay, let's do something. Which gives the feel for the album. It's very much all right. Let's just have some fun. Let's do some fun. Yep. Let's go cool harmonies. Let's just enjoy ourselves. Where the Who at this point, they're hitting you upside the head and going, you are going to be blown away. Here it comes. And even if you get warned about it, it's just right out the gate. We're going to scream at you and just pop. Here it is.
Yeah. The thing that makes the Who's Next work on here is, I mean, the songwriting is great. The craftsmanship is wonderful. It has some epic stuff on there, but this is Keith Moon at his absolute best. This is Moon at his absolute peak, and the production values really brings that home. And after this is when he started his slow decline, unfortunately. And just listening to this album is kind of winsome in a way because you think, what could he have been if he had kept his health and wellness in check? Nilsson, I agree with you with the mellow laid back, except for one song. And that song is, Jump Into the Fire. Just because that is so intense. You have the percussion in the middle and the scene from Goodfellas where Ray Liotta's like, being paranoid about being chased down because he sees the helicopter going ahead. yeah, that adds that energy to that song, but that has such a weird energy and it jumps out. And the fact that, it's, the same album with like, Coconut and, his cover of Let the Good Times Roll and then Without You, which is probably his biggest song. That song just leaps out and just grabs you by the throat, which is really cool.
Yeah,
That
but
is
you look
really
at that.
cool.
I mean, you're looking at Harry, and you're thinking you were hanging out with Brian Wilson at this time, and the two of you were lounging in bathrobes, just talking shop and what. I mean, I have no idea if that ever happened, but you look at that album cover, and you could listen to some of the harmonies, and you think that would make sense. That would totally make sense. Complete speculation. I have no clue. I don't know that, but boy, that would be funny to be real.
Yeah, well, the one thing that is pretty well documented is that the Beatles did say, at least Paul and John said, that Harry Nilsson was their favorite contemporary artist. So that tells you a little thing about Harry Nilsson. And if you, I haven't, the Who won this going away, but if you've not listened to Nilsson Schmilsson, do yourself a favor.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It is worth. It didn't get stomped on because of anything wrong with it. The Who is just massive, but I encourage everybody to check out Nilsson Schmilsson. I only knew the couple of songs, Without You, actually like Gotta Get Up, Jump Into the Fire, I think. So really enjoyed the whole thing. It's a good song craft and songwriting, and you can see where he really became an inspiration for artists that came later, particularly Jellyfish is the one that always pops into my head.
Yeah, most definitely. Next one up is another one that I think was kind of an easy call. Carole King Tapestry versus Santana 3. And again, this is nothing against Santana 3 or, Santana in general, but Carole King Tapestry is one of your massive heavyweight albums. It's just huge and hugely important.
Yeah.
And sorry, Carlos, you had no chance.
He didn't. I mean, he did though. See, so in the respect that, again, the beauty of doing this competition was that I got exposed to some stuff that I hadn't heard before, and so this made me a Santana fan. Listening to Santana 3, I mean, not a huge fan, right? But definitely enjoyed that album. Dude's got chops all over the place. It's really a fun listen. Really worth your time. I don't know, a good commute album or road trip album. But man, yeah, the way Carole King's album has it set a bar, and it's like you said, Rick, so important, so hugely influential. We said this in a previous episode. You guys help me with other artists, but I'll say this one: I don't think you get a Taylor Swift without this album.
You don't get Taylor Swift, you don't get Adele. You definitely don't get Adele. You don't get Adele. So sorry, that's terrible.
And I'll just say I don't get Adele. I'm not a Taylor Swift person, and for me, this was this didn't win it for me. I came into this with pulling for Santana and really loving Santana 3. I would have loved to have seen. I was one of the votes against, because I also have that contrarian streak in me. But it's, and I think I mentioned this in a prior episode. It's rhythm section. It's Carlos's guitar playing. It's John, I think your comment about it being kind of road trip music is absolutely right. I mean that it wasn't this particular album, but I think it was their original album, the self-titled, that I think when one time we were driving in Mexico and I'm listening to this and just loved it. And Santana 3 is a great, for me, just love the album.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I want to backtrack my comments a little bit. No offense to Carlos or Santana or the band, because they're absolutely great. And the other thing is too, I think, if memory serves me correct, this is the follow-up to their album Abraxas. And if you haven't listened to Abraxas, you need to do that, because that came out in 1970, and that's just absolutely stunning. So, and then King, one more thing about Carole King, we didn't mention about this, is like, before this album, she was known as a songwriter, because she had she was the king and Goffin King and wrote all these great songs. And I mean, the Beatles actually covered one of their songs on Please Please Me, Chains. And so, she always had the songwriting chops, but to have that voice going with that and knowing what she was going through when she was recording this, it's just absolutely great. So,
all right, Dave, take us to the next one, Dave.
Right. So the next combination was Master of Reality, Black Sabbath, up against Madman Across the Water, Elton John. Although you might question, so Elton John had the Madman, but I think Black Sabbath also had their Madman going on here, which, never mind, bad joke on that. But what do you guys think? What was the fun in the combination here?
Apples and oranges, just because you had the forerunner of heavy metal to the forerunner of great piano-led pop and rock music. I mean, without Elton John, you don't have Ben Folds, you don't have a lot of these other acts. I mean, although I will say, this is the debate for another time, Billy Joel, I think, is more talented than Elton John.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think Ben Folds is more talented than either of them.
Mm.
Ooh, there's a conversation for another time.
We're going to throw that out there. Here we go. Throw it out, and let's walk away now.
Good.
Yeah. Well, the interesting part with this is you've got with Master of Reality it's another one of those juggernaut albums that just it. I don't want to say it's almost too much to say redefine the music or whatever, because we say that about plenty of things, but it set a tone very literally. Tony Iommi was in the process of, in a sense, kind of creating a new genre within the guitar playing, and really laying a lot of that foundation here with this album. Any hint as to where the winner is on this one? Master of Reality, one going away, and I think was the clear winner in this combination here.
Yeah, and rightly so. I mean, we mentioned this in a previous episode that Madman is a side A album only. Nobody listens to side B. Whereas, I don't know, Master of Reality, I mean, it ends with Into the Void. Come on. So
you're waiting. Yeah. You're not leaving before this one parks itself. It's
One more thing about the Elton John thing, and because we haven't talked about this before, because I think we spent so much time going, why did this album beat Nursery Crime by Genesis? I think Madman Across the Water is another example of an artist that hadn't hit his true peak, the best was to come. Because after this, he releases Hunky Chateau in 1972, and then his masterwork, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, in 73, which is, the best thing that in his discography. You could probably say those are the two best albums in his discography. So definitely better things to come for Elton after this album. So the next one and the last one in this winner's bracket section that we're covering is David Bowie's Hunky Dory versus T-Rex Electric Warrior. This one was even though I would bemoan Marvin Gaye versus Led Zeppelin, it was still an easy call for me to pick Zeppelin for, because this one was the toughest one. I hemmed and hawed over this one quite a bit.
So, Rich, let me ask.
Yes.
Sorry. Let me ask this question of you, because I was trying to think of this. Does this strike you as, because before you were mentioning kind of the apples and oranges thing? This feels like you're looking at not totally similar albums, but they're a little more in the same vein as each other. So you're a little doing more of a consistent comparison.
Absolutely, I think so, and I think, you know, it kind of made me sad that, you know, like David Bowie and Mark Bolan didn't cut a duet, just because that would have
Sure.
been really cool. But I mean, just it really depends on the mood here. I mean, you know, this is the first album of Bowie's, what I think is Bowie's best era, the Ziggy Stardust era. But then T-Rex, I mean, that is glam rock. That is the roots of, you know, what you would see with David Johansen and the New York Dolls later on, and you know, I think the feel of, dare I say, glam metal like Motley Crue ties back into this good time party feel, because you listen to Electric Warrior, it's just a good time, good feel, let's just have fun kind of thing.
Yeah, and just in case we didn't make it clear, T-Rex actually beat David Bowie here, and it's, for me, yeah, there's some stylistic similarities, right? I mean, these are both sort of glam artists, right? When the mainstream press talks about them. So
definitely Bowie because of this period.
yeah, but what's interesting for me is Hunky Dory is an album that got a few absolute bangers on it that eclipse anything on Electric Warrior, but only a few. Whereas Electric Warrior has a whole bunch of really good songs. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I can go to Hunky Dory and listen to those 3 songs, and I'm like, cool, man, let's move on, right? But Electric Warrior, put on the whole album, let the whole album play. It's great.
Right. Yeah, you can take a song like Life on Mars and say that's you know, if you're going to have a soundtrack of the 70s, Life on Mars is going to need to be included. But you know, you kind of have, I mean, it's because that becomes kind of that background soundtrack for that time period. But you're right. I don't think, you know, you're not going to look to the whole album. It's not, there isn't that, the strength is not as consistent. And I think, John, I think you're nailing it with that, where T-Rex is top to bottom, you know, more consistently strong, where there's more peaks and valleys in Hunky Dory.
See, and I would disagree with that, because I think Hunky Dory is more consistent than, from top to bottom, than what you guys lead on, in my opinion. That being said, I will probably throw on Electric Warrior more than Hunky Dory anyway, just because it's just a good time. It's an album that you want to listen to when you want to be in a good mood.
It takes nothing away. I mean, I think, you know, Hunky Dory is growing on me. It's, you know, I'm not the biggest David Bowie fan, but this is one of those albums that helps bring me around to it a bit more. But you know, but what I had said before in a previous episode with regard to T-Rex was I was not really familiar with that album, period. But having listened to it through this process, for me, that just jumped way up there, and as a solid package, consistent throughout, in a way that, not saying that Hunky Dory was inconsistent, but not quite the same level of consistency.
Got it.
Yeah.
Any additional thoughts, John?
No, not here. That wraps it up for this roundup in the winners bracket. So thanks for being here. Episode 3, I think.
Yeah.
And next time we will jump back down to the losers bracket. So the act, or the album, sorry, that just lost in the conversation that we were having here are going to just immediately reappear in the losers bracket, and they'll be going up against the albums that we covered in episode 2, who are surviving down there in the losers bracket. So that'll be kind of a fun one. because we'll have some early losers going up against these recent losers. So
Yeah.
that'll be fun. All right. Thanks for
And-
being with us tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.